Good day, everyone. We are going to discuss the topic entitled Variable versus Constant Practice Enhancing the Learning and Skill Performance. For the introduction, to achieve maximum ability in tasks, completion practice plays a crucial role for students. While tasks are often familiar to learners, they commonly vary significantly between practice and performance settings. In order to adapt to different task requirements and perform skillfully in unfamiliar situations, learners need to engage in practice that exposes them to variations. Motor programs and parameters. Tasks like throwing involving a range of movement and specific characteristics that define their execution. These characteristics, known as generalized motor programs or GMPs, consist of consistent temporal arrangement that control how actions are performed. By defining movement characteristic during the program stage, learners can execute a GMP for a specific task, such as football, passing across various throwing scenarios. The selection of appropriate parameters and the ability to generalize across different task variations are key considerations.
Schema theory. Schema theory by Schmidt 1975, in which the learner acquires a set of rules called the schemas that relate the surface features of throwing, example, distances, speeds to the parameter values necessary to produce those actions. The traditional contrast of schema theory to the coordinative structure or dynamical system framework are emphasized and limitations of the variability of practice experiments noted. A central problem for theories of motor learning is changeover, the basis on which learning is typically defined. Most theories, including schema, have however undervalued the importance of the time-dependent nature of change in difference to the almost exclusive study of the amount of same average change in behavioral outcome. The persistent and transitory changes in movement and outcome that are observed in action are reflections of multiple time scales of change in the dynamical system. Variable practice enhances schema learning. Variable practice enhances their development, allowing more effective novel task performance in the future. In other words, variable practice enhances generalizability, allowing the performer to apply past learning to actions not specifically experienced before in practice. One is a constant practice group, practicing only a single member of a class of the task. The second is a variable practice group, practicing several members of the class of the task. For the football passing example, this would mean practicing varying football passing distances. The two groups have the same amount of practice, but they differ in the amount of practice variability they receive. The constant group typically outperforms the variable group during the acquisition phase. Typically, a learner can produce instances of a single version of a movement more effectively than multiple versions, particularly if these versions are interleaved. However, when subjects in both groups are switched to a novel version of the task or a transfer test, the group that receives variable practice performs at least as well as the constant group, and frequently they do so much more skillfully.
So, hello everyone, I'm Gretchen P. Pastor, and for today, I'm gonna be discussing the block and random practice and the Shea and Morgan experiment. So, what is the block practice? So, block practice is practicing one specific skill repeatedly. For example, in tennis, the tennis forehand, you are doing it repeatedly 50 times, 100 times, and so on. It's the easiest explanation of that block practice. While in random practice is you are practicing multiple skills in sequence, mix, or in order. For example, in tennis again, tennis forehand, tennis backhand. So that is the definition or the explanation of the block and random practice. So, what is the Shea and Morgan experiment? So, these two carried out a groundbreaking experiment that changed the way scientists think about the processes involved in a practice. So, Shea and Morgan had individuals perform three different tasks which is A, B, and C, that entailed responding to stimulus light with the correct sequence of quick hand and arm motion. So with each task having a different predefined sequence. So in one group of subjects practice the task in a sequential order, wherein finishing all the tasks before moving on to the next, which is the task B, and which they completed before moving on to task C. While the second group practice in a random order with no more than two consecutive trials for each given task. So the two groups had the same amount of practice on task A, B, and C, as well as the same total amount of practice. So the only difference with the two group was the order in which the tasks were presented. So here in the Shea and Morgan experiment, findings surprised many scientists in the field by showing that even though random conditions result in much less skilled performance than block conditions in acquisition, random practice conditions produce more learning. So that is the Shea and Morgan experiment.
By eliminating simple repeats of tasks, random practice challenges the learner to become more actively involved in the learning process. Random practice helps the student to remember the numerous tasks more clearly and meaningfully, strengthening memory and reducing task confusion. Random practice, adding variability and interleaving practice types, slows learning but improves retention and transfer. Like for example, random practice would be shooting 2 free throws in 50 times throughout a workout. Both results in 100 free throws, but the random shooting practice is more closely simulates a game. Contextual interference is the phenomenon in which interference during practice is surprisingly beneficial to skill learning. In the short term, it leads to a poorer practice performance but superior retention and transfer performance in the long term. The contextual interference effect in motor learning refers to the interference that results from practicing a task within the concept of other tasks in practice session. Several studies have shown that practice under conditions of high contextual interference with random practice order degrades.
So right now I'm gonna be giving example to a random practice limitation that I've cited in the module. So a great scenario would be attempting to teach extremely young students a adult task. So that is very or overly demanding. So in such circumstances, random practice might make the practice environment overly difficult, so possibly it might be harmful to successful learning.
Alternatives to block and random practice. Block and random practice represent extreme ends of the practice schedule continuum. Random practice involves very little or no repetition of the same task from one practice trial to the next, and block practice involves almost no interleaving of practice on the other task. Performance and retention, with block practice facilitating performance in practice but having a detrimental effect on retention, and vice versa for random practice. Thus, one need for seeking an alternative to a random versus block practice schedule concerns that the fact that neither optimizes both performance and learning, that is, neither is a practice structure that facilitates learning without the degrading effects seen during the practice period.
Practice contingencies. While a hybrid approach to practice may seem ideal, it may not be responsive to individual preferences. Some individuals may benefit from a specific number of block trials, while others may prefer more or fewer repetitions. A contingency schedule takes individual variations into account by considering task difficulty and providing choices for task repetition, or selecting simpler or more challenging assignments. This emerging topic offers a personalized approach to practice is scheduling. For the summary, Learning can be enhanced through various practice methods, including physical practice, observation, mental practice, and imagery. Variable practice, which intentionally introduces changes to a task, promotes generalization and retention. Random practice, where trials of different tasks are interleaved during acquisition, results in significantly improved skill performance during retention. It prevents learners from repeating the same movement output and allows them to gain experience from performing various tasks in subsequent trials. That would be our fourth. Thank you.
So to sum up our discussion or our topic for today, variable and random practice as well as block and random practice can be used in physical education and sports. So to develop physical skills, adaptability, and strategic thinking. Block and random practice involves teaching fundamental movements or skills individually, then gradually introducing game-based activities. So that's our discussion. Bye!